Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob Staton, Robbie Williams, Adam Nathan with you. No Seahawks game today, but we thought we'd get together and have a chat because there's a lot going on with the Seahawks at the moment, not just on the field, actually. There's been quite a bit of stuff off the field as well to discuss. Obviously, I had my say on the Cowboys game on Thursday. So, fellas, first opportunity to chat to you about that. Robbie, what did you make of the Cowboys game on Thursday?
So, I mean, overall there were a lot of things that I came away with liking, but I think that fourth quarter just kind of rang true of what I actually thought about the team and what I kind of felt. And I think honestly, it was a disappointing loss. I mean, I really wanted to win that game, and I think you go back and you watch the season as a whole, and I think it just sums up that fourth quarter just sums up how the season is. And I don't have high expectations for the team, and I just think it's time for a change.
Wow, straight in there, Robbie.
I might as well just get out. I'm just going to get out of the way.
No messing
I'm too
about.
Pissy, too pissy.
Adam, what was your thought on the game?
I thought it generally summed up the discussions we've been having over the last few weeks and actually kind of crystallized the thoughts that I've had, that I think this team is playing well under its potential. I think it has the horses on both sides of the ball to easily compete with so many of these teams, but they're just not being coached up to their potential as far as I'm concerned. The Dallas game, they were expected to get battered, and they go into the fourth quarter, or one play into the fourth quarter, with an 8-point lead. And by all accounts, they earned that 8-point lead with some great play and the talent. But when it came to execute and some of the coaching at the end, I suppose, look, you could say you're speaking out about both sides of your mouth if you're saying, well, they got there, so they must have done well, but then they blew it. But I just don't think this team is playing up to the potential that it has. And I think that's a coaching thing on both defensive, offensive side of the ball, and also the guy that's overseeing the whole thing. And I know it's probably going to be that sort of show. But yeah, I think this team is better than the record. And I think when people are saying, 9-8, we'll get bounced out, like same old. I don't think it should be, because I think this team should be much better than that. And I think it's got the talent to be better than that. And we should expect better.
I think the fact that they've shown flashes of some really good football at times is what validates your opinion there, Adam, that they can be better. The problem is that they will, like the Dallas game was a great example of that. Offensively, very, very good for 3 quarters. And then in the fourth quarter, they didn't do anything. They had 3 fourth down conversion attempts. They needed something like 2, 3, and 5 yards, I think it was, on all those. It wasn't 4th and 17, and they couldn't get it done. And that's the frustrating thing, is that the offense has been incredibly streaky all year. We see what its potential is. We see what its capability is. But we've also seen it look so bad. And when it looks as bad as it has at times, where they go whole halves without doing anything, that does validate what you're saying there, that it's better and that we should expect more. And then defensively, I definitely think we should be expecting more defensively, because they have spent so much. Let's just get it out of the way and very quickly run through what they've spent. 3 second-round picks on edge rushers. Second-round pick traded for Leonard Williams. Free agent signing Jerron Reed. Massive free agent signing for the Seahawks, Draymond Jones. They don't sign players to that kind of money, but they've signed him to something like $17 million a year. He's been added to that. First-round pick on Jordan Brooks. They brought Bobby Wagner back. Top 5 pick on Devin Witherspoon. Spent a fortune on their safeties, and one of those safeties cost 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick in a trade, and they've paid Uchenna and Nwosu. So when you have that level of investment, which is within the top 2 or 3 teams in the league in terms of investment defensively, you expect better than to be something like the 22nd best defense in the league per DVOA, which year after year after year, that is what the Seahawks are. And it does, for me, come down to a coaching thing, whereby they are not getting enough consistency out the group. They haven't been able to create their identity. The same issues have lasted for the whole of the season. And we can, I'm sure over the course of the stream, we're going to be talking a lot about coaching and everything like that. And they're 6-6. So Robbie, as we sit here today, do you think the Seahawks will qualify for the playoffs?
I mean, I've been watching today's scores. I haven't really watched any football today, but I've just been kind of poking at the scores just to see because, I mean, you're looking at, I mean, what teams are really in a position to actually overtake the Seahawks for that 7th seed in the playoffs? And I mean, you're looking at like the Packers and the Falcons, maybe. I mean, there's not many teams that I feel like are in a position that are probably going to take it away from us. So I feel like, yeah, we're probably going to back into that position. I mean, the Rams, I guess, depending on how well they do, I guess there's an opportunity that they could sneak in there and take us away. But I mean,
the Rams will overtake us if they win. They've just scored a touchdown against the Cleveland Browns to lead 10-7, but because they have the tiebreaker over Seattle, if they win today against Joe Flacco's Cleveland Browns, they will be ahead of the Seahawks on the tiebreaker. And then you have the Packers playing the Chiefs. The Vikings are obviously in the mix. The Falcons at the minute are leading their terrible division, so they're
that's right.
the 4th seed. So it's the Saints couldn't come from behind to beat the Lions, which helps the Seahawks in terms of their playoff situation. So really, we're looking at, Dallas are going to be the 5th seed, or if the Eagles hold on to win their division, the Dallas Cowboys will be the 5th. You will then have 2 spots, and it will be between the Packers, the Seahawks, the Vikings, and potentially the Saints. I think that's basically the gist of it.
Yeah, I just could see a scenario where we sneak in somehow, just enough to sneak in. But I mean, it depends on how well the Rams. I guess for me, that's the lining there right there would be the Rams. If they win this game and they have they won 2 over us already, so they got that on us, and that's where they would get in. But I don't know. I mean, even if we get in the playoffs, I mean, I don't feel like this is a team that's going someplace if they get in the playoffs. And I know Pete said something earlier this week about, if we get in the playoffs, we're battle tested and ready. I just don't feel like that's just jargon speak, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't hold a lot of confidence in the team right now.
Yeah, I think that, just because you brought that up, listening to Pete Carroll speak after the back of that Dallas Cowboys game, I struggle to listen to him anymore. It's the same old excuses. It's the same old non-answers to why are certain issues happening. When he was giving that speech at the end of his Brock and Solk interview, where he was talking about when we get to the playoffs, and I know that people don't want to hear that right now, but when we get there, we'll be ready. We'll be this, we'll be that. We'll have gone through everything. No, that's just what that is a load of old nonsense. You've lost 3 games in a row. You haven't looked remotely capable of competing against the better teams in the NFL. That's what is happening, Pete. This is not a battle-tested team. You're not rolling with the punches and learning lessons along the way against the Niners and the Ravens and the Rams. What you're doing is you're just getting beaten up, and you've lost handsomely. Now, they made more of a game of it against Dallas, but this idea that, that he was suggesting that everything will be hunky-dory once they get to the playoffs, there's nothing to suggest that about the present day team or their record of 1 playoff win in 6 years. There's absolutely nothing to say that. And when you listen to Pete now, I just find myself just turning to the off button. I don't want to hear it. I've tuned out. Don't want to hear it anymore. It's nonsense. Let's see some answers on the field to all of the myriad of issues that never get solved with this team. Adam, on the playoff question, I don't think the Seahawks are going to win it either of the next 2, so they'll be 6 and 8. But having watched the Titans today, they are a very beatable team. The Steelers are currently getting their arses kicked by the 2-10 Arizona Cardinals. They're a very beatable team. And the Cardinals are, they're a sparky little team and could cause the Seahawks issues. I think that game will determine whether or not the Seahawks make the playoffs or not. But I think they will go into that game potentially at 8 and 8.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, they're not, well, they might, but I don't think there's a huge chance of them winning either of the next 2 games, given they're probably the 2 best teams in the NFL. And they haven't shown much in the previous 3 to suggest that that's the kind of team they can run with. So, yeah, it's going to be, can you win your last 3 games of the season? I think, because I don't think 8 and 9 will be enough now, what with Packers and Rams and teams like that. So, yeah, I mean, but as I say, it's not even that. It's the sort of acceptance of that's what this team is in general that I find frustrating, because I don't think that's what this team should be at all. I think if you were drafting, you took the whole league and you were drafting position groups And there would be loads of position groups that the Seahawks have that, at least on paper, would be drafted pretty high as a collective. And I just think that people are not demanding enough of this team, because that's what they have been in the past. It's 2 years out from the trade that you made to try and change everything. Now, you really should be seeing at least the green shoots of progress at that point. And the way this season's going, it looks like there's just the same. That this is going to be the team. Like, the two safeties that people, I'm sure we're going to talk about them. They're going to be on the roster next season. They have to be, because of the finances with the restructure, unless they want to take an enormous cap hit on those on dead money. Like, they are going to be on the team. So for all the umming and ahhing and the huffing that we'll do about them, that they're on the team. The two cornerbacks, they're on the team. Yeah, the tight ends, they're going to change, but you've got your two running backs, you've got the three wide receivers, probably got the quarterback that's going to play next year, and you've got your two tackles. Like, the fulcrum of this team for next year is in place, and it needs to be better, but it's just not.
Yeah, on the two safeties, we will talk about that. There is a very realistic prospect of neither of those players being in Seattle next year. Financially, it will cost them. They can cut Quandre Diggs outright, and that will save them $11 million. There's a $10 million dead money hit, but the Seahawks have shown over the years they are very willing to take on a chunky dead hit. And $10 million to save 11 with Quandre Diggs is neither here nor there. So I think that they would be willing to part with Diggs and to save the 11 million. And then with Jamal Adams, they would have to do that, you would imagine, as a post-June 1st cut, which would mean they split the dead money over 2 years, but that would enable them to save $16.5 million next year. So that is an incredibly sizable saving. And with the two combined, it would give you a realistic chance of, say, retaining someone like Leonard Williams. And I think it's almost to the point where it's not viable for the Seahawks to keep Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams at that cost. I've got some statistics here. Quandre Diggs leads all safeties in missed tackles. So there is not another safety in the NFL who has more missed tackles than Quandre Diggs. Jamal Adams and Julian Love are both in the top 10 for missed tackles. So the three Seahawks safeties are all in the top 10. Now, maybe that's coaching. Maybe the coaching staff are to blame on that. But whoever is to blame, if you are going to have safeties missing tackles to that extent, then you might as well just have somebody who's on $2 million, instead of $25 million. Quandre Diggs' PFF grade, 53.9, is good enough for 77th in the NFL. You cannot have a player on $21 million next year as the 77th best safety in the league, and Jamal Adams is the 40th best safety, and his cap hit is 26.9. It will become a meme. Julian Love's, incidentally, is the 43rd best safety with a 64.1. You cannot be paying these players what you are paying them to have that level of performance. They need to move on. They needed to do it a while ago, but this needs to be it now. They need to transfer their funds from the safety position into the trenches, O-line, D-line. They finally need to just rip the Band-Aid off and move on from that. I do want to spend a bit of time talking about Jamal Adams because he's been in the news for other reasons. Before we get on to that, and seeing as we're talking about sort of defensive performances here, what do we make of Bobby Wagner? Because for the last few games, it feels like he has just been a total liability in coverage. That teams are exploiting him, identifying where he is, and beating him in coverage. Have you got a sense, Robbie, on, is there any way to sort of live with this? Or are we just seeing a great player who has come to the end?
Yeah, he's definitely lost a step. Basically, that's what I was trying to get at. He's lost a step, and you can see it. Again, I think that's probably partially coaching. They probably put him in a bad position to cover players that he just can't hang with anymore. I mean, he's definitely not a bad football player by any means, but yeah, he's definitely becoming a liability on defense. But he's not the only one. It'd be easy to point out several other players like you just did, our whole safeties. I mean, there's so many things going wrong with this team, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, that it should be a lot better. He's just one of the issues, but yeah, he's lost a step. He's getting, he definitely can't keep up with guys and coverage. And then, I just don't think they're putting him in the right position. It's, I kind of just like what Jason said. It just doesn't seem like he's a very good fit for this defense right now. I honestly don't expect him back next year.
I think it's more evidence really of the Seahawks just investing in the wrong areas, really. Bobby Wagner's cap hit's not massive. It's $7 million this year. But when you add that to the cap hits for Diggs and Adams and Wagner and a first-round pick on Jordan Brooks, investing in those, in the linebacker and the safety, has been something that the Seahawks have done over and over and over again. While the pass rush hasn't been good enough, the offensive line hasn't been good enough in certain spots. You've just got to get your priorities right. Adam, have you got a thought on Wagner's performance?
Nothing really to add beyond what you've said. I don't think they've necessarily always put him in prime positions. I think, was it the Cooks touchdown on Thursday? I mean, asking Wagner at his age to cover Brandon Cooks without any sort of safety help. I think he was expecting help on that play. What do you expect to happen there? But obviously, look, the tackle numbers are good. He's been an asset, I think, in the run game, but yeah, that's not really what you're paying these guys that much for. The coverage does matter. There's obviously intangibles that everyone says he brings to the table, and that's certainly not to be ignored, because that does clearly matter. If you look at, back to Jamal Adams, if you look at some sort of the faux machismo that he demonstrates versus what an actual leader does in Bobby Wagner, I think that's not something to be sniffed at. But also, you do need to back it up with the play. And there's a reason he got basically fired in back-to-back off seasons by the teams he was on, because the performances were slipping. And it's great to know. Yeah, it's great for him that he's back on a team that he started out, and it's good to see him play again. But it's not really something that's going to be future-proofing you going forward, is it?
He's better than Cody Barton.
Well, he has got that. He will always carry that mantle. The thing is that you highlight. I know you've read this, Adam. I think because you highlighted it to me. There was an article on field goals, and it kind of I thought it only scratched the surface of what was really happening here. But essentially the singular point that it was making is that what Bobby Wagner does very well as a run defender isn't very important to the overall performance of the defense. And what he's bad at, the coverage side of things, is potentially backbreaking against certain opponents. And when you look at him, he is currently the 12th ranked safety on PFF, 82.1, but he has an appalling coverage grade, 61.0, and his run defense is 91.4. Actually, if I have a look at this, so he's got the third best run defense grade amongst linebackers. But in terms of coverage, he is way down the list. I mean, he is 48th in coverage amongst linebackers. So that's a real problem. And it's just a position really that, when you think about what did the Eagles do? Like, it's a copycat league. It should be a copycat league. What did the Eagles do? They lost their two linebackers in the offseason. They just plugged a couple of guys in there. They lost their safeties. They just plugged a couple of guys in there. And then they traded for Kevin Byard, with a 5th round throwaway pick or something right before the trade deadline. That's how they addressed those two positions. The Seahawks are pumping money and resources into those two positions. They've done it for years, and it's too much. It's too much. And they need to readjust that spend and move it to the trenches rather than blowing it at linebacker and at safety. You've just got to get your priorities right. By the way, if anybody has any questions, or if anybody wants to make a comment or chime in the comment section, if you send your super chats in, not only will that help support the channel, but that will also mean that you can put a question to us, or you can raise a point, or whatever you want to say, then they'd be much appreciated. So get those super chats in. Right, there's loads of things I want to get into, but I want to get onto this because this is the thing that has, it's probably pissed me off more than anything else this week. Jamal Adams has a terrible game against the Dallas Cowboys, which ends with him giving up the game-winning touchdown. His coverage against Jake Ferguson was quite embarrassing, and he, having done all the jawing that he usually does during a game, he looked a bit of a tit at the end of that game. And I don't know if you've seen the clip of when the touchdown is scored. CD Lamb is running from about 30 yards away, pointing at Jamal Adams, laughing hysterically at him because of that coverage. So he likes to give it a lot of this on the field, and yet he has no sacks, no interceptions, no big plays. Got a handful of decent run stops, a couple of TFLs, stuff like that. It's not had an impact this year. It's done absolutely nothing. And off the back of that game, a New York journalist for the Jets quote tweeted a video of the touchdown that he gave up to lose the Dallas game and simply wrote, "Yikes." How offensive. And Jamal Adams' response to this was to, I don't know, go through his pictures on social media and find a picture of his wife. The picture was of the reporter with his wife and child, his infant child. And he cut out the reporter and child and posted a picture of the man's wife on Twitter and wrote, "Yikes." Now, I've seen some Seahawks fans online saying, "Who cares?" I've seen G. Scott embarrass himself by trying to defend Jamal Adams over this. And G. Scott, quite frankly, you're an utter embarrassment for trying to do that. And you should be ashamed of yourself. And Jamal Adams deserves every single person who follows the Seahawks to be utterly disgusted by him. And for nobody to bring this up to Pete Carroll at his press conference on Friday was a disgrace. And it's also a disgrace that nobody has made Jamal Adams within the Seahawks franchise apologize for this and take ownership of it. In fact, 24 hours after tweeting that and deleting it, presumably because he was told to by the team, he was back attacking other New York reporters. He called one of them Mr. Potato Head. Why? Because this New York reporter said he was a bad guy. And quite frankly, Jamal Adams has got no defense. Anybody sticking up for him saying, well, they're going after him in the New York media. Jamal Adams proved he was a bad guy this week by calling out that reporter by insulting his wife, who, but incidentally, was an attractive lady. It was absolutely uncalled for. It was a low blow. And whenever you go after a man's wife, you should be expected to be punched in the face, metaphorically or physically. And I think metaphorically in this instance, the Seahawks should have cut him 24 hours after this happened. I don't want to see him play for the Seahawks again. I think he's a total embarrassment to every Seahawks fan. I think he's quite clearly unhinged, and I want him out now. Robbie, what do you think?
Well, I 1,000% agree. I think I messaged both of you guys. I thought, wow, how is he still on the team after this? This is a super embarrassing moment for him. It's a super embarrassing moment for the team. And I mean, he's just proving his character right there on the kind of individual he is. I don't care if I literally don't care if he was great on our team. I'd be saying the same thing. You don't do that. You don't go after personal. Just because he said yikes on a coverage play, he's not worth the time anymore or money that we're giving him, and he hasn't shown to be a class act here, and it's not the kind of guy that you want on your team. Doesn't sound like a kind of guy. I'm like, he's not a leader. He's not someone who's like bringing the team up by any means. This is terrible. I don't even know what else really to say about it. It doesn't seem like a guy that really should be around. I don't even think he should be in the NFL. I mean, if people like Earl Thomas can do stupid things like that, I don't know how Adams can stay in the league and succeed. So I think honestly he might not play again.
Do you know
personally.
what the worst thing was that everybody was talking about this. So I follow some other NFL fans who have been tweeting about this. They're not Seahawks fans. They're general NFL enthusiasts, draft enthusiasts, whatever. And they're all saying, what an absolute scumbag, quite frankly, for attacking a man's wife. If you have an issue with a reporter or anybody for that matter, take it out with them. Frankly, if you're an NFL player, I'd say be above it, quite frankly. And if you can't be above it, delete your Twitter account. But if you're going to have a go at somebody, play the ball, not the man, or in this case, the man's wife. Why on earth would you bring her into this? I mean, it's an absolute disgrace. And to sort of insult a man's wife in front of millions of people, because millions of people would have seen that tweet. That is the lowest thing I can imagine you're doing on Twitter. I can't imagine anything worse than what Jamal Adams did there. And there's somebody in the comments right now saying, "Oh, well, the New York media get after him." I'm sorry. If you want to defend Jamal Adams on this, you're an absolute wazzock. And you should have a look at yourselves in the mirror. It's a disgrace. And I don't want him on this team. I want to be able to be proud of this team. And they have made a massive point of going for character in the drafts and good people. So I tell you what, let's do away with anybody who's had a DUI. Let's do away with anybody who's ever abused women. And let's do away with Jamal Adams for this so we can be proud of this football team again. And in this instance, take a hike, mate. Look, cricket's within the Seattle media over this. No one's talked about it. No one's brought it up. The Seahawks haven't addressed it. Adams hasn't addressed it, hasn't apologised. He was still going. The only person I've seen tweet about it is Softy saying he needs to get off Twitter. Nobody else has tweeted. No one, as far as I can see, nobody else has really addressed this. I think it's an utter disgrace. Adam, have you got a thought on it?
Yeah, I think, look, people do bad, annoying, terrible things, well, on a fairly regular basis. And it's almost always followed up with the obligatory picture of a paragraph or two on someone's iPhone notes app explaining how sorry they are, how much of a rush of blood to the head it was, how they'll look to be better. And I think whilst the incident itself or incidents have been ugly, the thing that I really can't square is, as you say, just the lack of a discussion about it, but more importantly, the lack of apology from him or addressing it anywhere from the team. And I'm obviously projecting here, but it just suggests that, like, let's assume that the Seahawks haven't missed it entirely. Like, someone will have been on Twitter and seen it, so they're aware this has happened. And I find it alarming that it would suggest, again, and I'm projecting, it would suggest that they have no way to, interact and control this guy's behavior, because you would think that as a boss of someone, you would go to your employee and say, you need to cut that out and apologize and delete it and make a donation to something. Like, that's just easy PR. That's an easy win. And the bury the head in the sand and the lack of apology and the tweets still being up, I find that absolutely astonishing. And from an organizational standpoint, strikes me as a worse look almost than what Jamal Adams has done, who, look, we don't know the guy, but he doesn't come across as the best bloke in the world. So, bad bloke does bad thing, fine. The team doing nothing about it, that's what I really cannot square at all.
Pete Carroll will speak to the media at some point in the next few days. And I want him to be asked, what did you make of Jamal Adams's tweets, which I would hope that he's been made aware of, and what have you said to him about that, and how will you address this moving forward? And I want to hear his answer to that question. I think it's really important. It's really important. And to be honest, I just felt really sick about that, and really embarrassed as a Seahawks fan that for 2 days, that was, if you typed Seahawks into Google, everything was Jamal Adams's tweet. Like, even like newspapers over here had written articles online about Jamal Adams's tweet. The British media were talking about it online. So, no, sorry. not good enough. And a lot of people have pulled up this tweet from February the 10th, 2018 from Jamal Adams, which I will read it to you now. Treat everyone with respect, yo. No matter how much success you have in life, being an arsehole isn't it. Hashtag be cool. Jamal Adams' words 5 years ago. Be careful what you tweet, because fun enough, it took about 30 seconds for somebody to dig that out and show you what an absolute utter hypocrite and moron you are. And I want him gone ASAP. I don't want to see him. I don't want to watch him play for the Seahawks anymore. I'm done. Get rid.
Just quickly, there's someone trying to conflate Metcalf with Adams in the comments, and I just think, can we leave that out? Because DK's been a bit aggressive on the field and maybe done some silly stuff in the heat of the moment. This is not like that. And even by association, tarring DK Metcalf, who appears to be a pretty straight up guy overall, with Adams is just not on. So if we can leave that, that'd be great.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, let's move on to Pete Carroll. I had a look, because Pete Carroll's record in the NFL, when Russell Wilson isn't his quarterback, isn't that great. So with the Jets, he was 12-20, and with the Patriots, he was 27-23. So before he came to Seattle, he was 39-43 as a coach, and that includes playoffs. So 39-43 as a head coach. He joins the Seahawks. Before drafting Russell Wilson, he was 15-19. Since trading Russell Wilson away, the Seahawks are 15-15. So his record outside of Seattle, 39-43. His record in Seattle, minus Wilson, is 30-34. He has only had success in Seattle when he has a quote-unquote franchise quarterback. And I don't know what to make of that. I'm part of me wonders whether or not, doesn't wonder it, that knows that since the LOB disbanded, the only reason this team had success was because Russell Wilson carried the team. And then once Russell Wilson's been traded, they neither have Russell Wilson carrying the team nor an LOB defense carrying the team. And the end product is what we're seeing at the moment. Robbie, I suppose the question is, can Carroll get back to having some semblance of competitive contention again if they can essentially replace what Wilson used to do as a franchise quarterback, or not? Or are those, because it's so hard to do that, do we really want to spend the next few years trying to find out whether that's possible? Or is it just time to, draw a line under it and move on and get rid? If they draft a quarterback and actually go for this, could they actually get somewhat back on track? Because by the looks of the results, Carroll can only win when he has a quarterback who will do it for him.
I mean, that in sentence that you just said right there is the reason why he could. Can he do it? No, I don't think he can. I think he's made, there's too many poor choices that he's made, leading this team. And he had a reset in 2017. He's had an opportunity to rebuild this team again. And though the team will always be competitive, which they have been, I don't think this is not a team that I think he's going to be. I don't think he has it in him to lead this to a Super Bowl championship team, unless he has a quarterback that can make up for bad play calling and kind of go off the fly and make things happen with his legs, or, rally the team around him to do things that, that I personally don't think Geno can do. So I'm not knocking Geno right now, for his play. He played pretty good against Dallas and everything, but I just think he needs someone to help elevate this team. I don't think he has the ability to do it anymore.
And I think part of the problem is with Pete, the way he can succeed in this team is to get a quarterback and then to go and get the best coordinators that money can buy. And we've talked about this plenty of times over the years, and just sort of become a figurehead. But I think he believes that he needs to have his people around him constantly to make this work, that ultimately he needs control. So you've got a coach who won't do what is needed to be successful, and will constantly keep appointing people to key roles that are his guys, part of his sort of DNA, his structure, rather than going on outside and risking, outside voices and disagreements and stuff like that. He wants sort of the control and to know that he's got sort of can manage everybody how he wants to. He doesn't want to do that. But at the same time, we don't seem to have an owner who is receptive to changing things overall. So we're just stuck, aren't we, Adam?
Yeah, and also, like, are there any coaches in the league that kind of go Jackie Moon and basically, allow an offensive and defensive coordinator to come in and actually run the team and just leave the head coach to focus on the cheerleading and halftime speeches and stuff like that? I can't think of one off the top of my head that completely defer both sides of the ball to the best person for the job. So, and the worry is that he's supposed to be the defensive guru, and the defense is probably the side of the ball that's let the team down more than anything this year, especially as it pertains to, resources. So yeah, like, it would be great if Pete Carroll was able to just sort of be a rah-rah guy with the best offensive coordinator and the best defensive coordinator that are given carte blanche to do whatever they want, and it makes the team tick. But it's fairly utopian to think that's likely, isn't it?
I think part of the issue for me is that if Pete Carroll thinks that he's going to run it his way and it's going to be his way and he has to sort of have more or less full control over everything, why are we not seeing it show up? Why are we not seeing a commitment to the run? Why are we not seeing a brand of football that you would associate as Pete Carroll football? And why are they so incapable? Like, I don't think any of us in this stream are X's and O's experts, but I don't think you really need to be to think, do you know what? Where have they had success this year? It's been putting 2-3 tight ends on the field, sort of using them quite heavily in protection, and then using them as well in the passing game. Play action, maybe committing more to the run game. That would be a way to sort of see the Seahawks succeed. And you watch I've watched the red zone today, and it is a bad NFL season. We're seeing a lot of bad football. What I don't sort of see though is teams going against what their foundations are. They stick to their identity. You kind of watch a team and you kind of feel like you're watching that team when they are playing. And from the Seahawks point of view, I feel like, Adam, we're watching a lot of not just inconsistencies, but like a jumbled up thinking. Like, they've got themselves tied up in knots about how do we feature all of our offensive weapons. So they've spent like 5 or 6 weeks wondering how can we get Jackson Smith-Njigba and DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett involved. And then the running game's just gone way by the wayside. And then they think, oh yeah, but they've got the tight ends. Well, we need to get them more involved. But they don't want to take the receivers off the field to get the tight ends more involved. So they've got all these options. They don't know what to do with them. And then, you sort of see the Eagles playing the Niners right now. And you'd think that rather than think, oh crap, what do we do with all these pieces? What they would actually do is sit down on a Monday after a game and go, right, who have we got this week? We've got this opponent. This is how we can attack this opponent. This is going to be a Noah Fant day. This is going to be a DK Metcalf day. This is where we're going to attack the middle with DK running across the route or Jackson Smith-Njigba. This is going to be a day when we're going to have sort of everybody flood the middle, but we'll still have Jackson Smith-Njigba able to run downfield. This will be a day when we are just going to run up to the line. We're going to snap the ball and we are going to beat the crap out of you up front with the running game. And we've seen games like that. And Curtis Allen does a fantastic write-up every single week and says, here's where the opponent's weaknesses are. This is, they lost last week and here's why they lost, because the other team ran it 40 times and threw 20. So let's do that. And then you watch the game and the Seahawks throw it 45 times and they run it 10. And you think, well, if we can sit here and sort of, one, have an idea on how to attack opponents, and two, sort of understand ways to maybe get the most out of the players you've got, why can the Seahawks not do that? And that really comes down to Carroll. And people have focused a lot on Geno Smith and a lot on Shane Waldron and a lot on Clint Hurt. And those three individuals probably will not carry the Seahawks to where they need to go. But neither will the head coach. And too often, Adam and Robbie, the focus does fall on other people because they don't want to point the finger at Pete. He's like a sacred cow in Seattle. You cannot possibly go anywhere near the sacred cow. He has to be Teflon to any kind of criticism or challenge, and everybody else gets the finger of blame. But he's not achieved anything in years. It's one playoff win against 40-year-old Josh McCown in 6 years, Robbie. We ain't going anywhere, are we?
No, absolutely. And I think that, I mean, you kind of just hit it on the head there. I mean, Pete has so much control, and I think people in the chat are all saying the same thing, that, he's got, doesn't matter the coordinators that come in. We see the same thing with every coordinator that comes in, and there was supposed to be, when Waldron came in, there was supposed to be that time where, Pete was supposedly had released a little control to John. Things had gotten a little bit better, it seemed like. But at the same time, he's still the head coach. He's still making all the decisions with the team. He's part of those game plans. He's part of putting together the strategy for attacking teams. He's part of that defense. He's supposed to be this, defensive guru, and it just doesn't seem like it's working anymore. We've got how much resources in our safety position? How much is tied into our linebackers and to our linebackers?
£1 billion pounds.
I mean, this is what I'm saying. Like, it's just time for I think someone said, I'm not really sure. I'm at accountability. Someone said something about holding Pete accountable, and I agree that who does? No one does. He hasn't made here. There's no one's gonna. Jody Allen isn't going to do anything.
The thing that really frustrates me is, I'm not for a second suggesting that the Indianapolis Colts are a great team, but Shane Steichen is a first-year head coach, and 3 years ago, no one had heard of Shane Steichen. Like, he was a coach, and he went to work with the Eagles, and he's ended up becoming the Indianapolis Colts head coach, and he hasn't got Anthony Richardson. He's injured. He hasn't got Jonathan Taylor. He's injured. He hasn't got one receiver who you would swap for any of Seattle's top three. And they've basically just plugged in Gardner Minshew and Zach Moss at quarterback and running back respectively. Don't have a big name tight end. They've scored 31 points today. They haven't had a single turnover, and they've won. They're 7-5, and they've won more games than the Seahawks. So people go on about, well, we can't get rid of Pete. The culture's too good. Like, the culture has produced Jamal Adams' tweet this week. The culture produced Richard Sherman screaming in the touchline. The culture produced Cam Chancellor's ill-timed holdout. The culture produced Earl Thomas giving the rod to the coach and Marshawn Lynch saying, I'm not getting on the bus. The culture enabled the Seahawks to have an epic meltdown after losing a Super Bowl that ruined a dynasty forever. The culture, I don't see it. I don't think it's as good as people say, quite frankly. I think it's a load of baba, really. Like, I think Pete's a good motivator, clearly. And I think players will play for him and like playing in Seattle. And certainly it's the polar opposite. Like, just look at every New England Patriots coach who goes and is a head coach anywhere. It's just, they're all failing, aren't they? Because I think the modern day player doesn't want to be yelled at by a Bill Belichick wannabe. Like, they're all just people who, they want to do that. And Pete's the opposite of that. So I do think people will play for him. And he has made the team competitive for a long period of time. But if Shane Steichen can just be plucked off the Eagles staff and plonked into Indianapolis and win more games than Pete Carroll is with the collection of pieces that he has in Indianapolis, then I'm sorry, I think the culture is overrated. And I think what we actually need is somebody who on a technical level can just get the most, like, these are the parts that I've got. How do I turn them into a functioning system? How can I tactically go about beating this opponent? Because it's not just, hey, guy, let's go. I'm going to run into a whiteboard or whatever it is that Pete does the night before a game. It's no, you've actually got to. The worst thing for me, I'm sorry to go off on one, guys. The worst thing for me was traveling 5,000 miles to watch the Seahawks play the Niners, and them just looked totally unprepared to play the Niners. This is not just a team that they're playing randomly once every 4 years. This is a common opponent who they face all the time. And they had no idea how to attack the 49ers, who were a great team. No one's suggesting that they should have had all the answers and beaten the Niners or anything like that. But to look as totally unprepared, that your first snap of the game would be, a Geno Smith QB draw or a botch play, whichever one it was, followed by 2 passes. And then I think the next 2 plays were both passes as well. How was this a system to go and say, right, this is what we have. Here's how we play the 49ers. Here's how we attack them. That's the biggest problem. Shane Steichen can go to Indianapolis and do it with his, cobbled together offense. And Carroll spent all this resource. He can't put a great defense or even a good defense on the field. He can't put a good offense that's consistent on the field. Kevin Stefanski has won 7 games with the Cleveland Browns playing the remaining husk of Deshaun Watson's embarrassing career. He's had PJ Walker, is it? Whoever that is. He's had DTR for a game and a half. He's injured now. And now 38-year-old Joe Flacco is playing for the Browns. They've got the ball. They're trailing by 3 points. They're 7-4. If they win this game, they'll be 8-4. And they might beat the Rams with Joe Flacco at quarterback. Kevin Stefanski is doing all of that with much less than Pete Carroll has. And it's not good enough. So everybody out there who's saying they can't possibly imagine life without Pete Carroll and that the culture's too important to pass on and that it's consistent playoff qualification. No, it's consistently underwhelming for a number of years and they're not going anywhere. Let's have a coach who can come together. How excited would you be, Adam, if we got like a good offensive-minded coach and you said, right, there you go. You've got DK, JSN, Tyler, the tight ends, your 2 running backs. Go and make it into an explosive offense. That'd be exciting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I also think and that was a great rant, by the way, one of your top 5 of the year at least. So chapeau to you on that one. I also think there's a real bad faith argument going around when it comes to discussing a new head coach, because yes, there would be a cultural or DNA change, whatever that even means. But a lot of the times I hear that, well, if they change the coach, then they have to get immediately better. But that's not it at all, because I don't think Pete Carroll's going to win the team the Super Bowl the next year. And as a result, that already gives a new head coach at least 1 year grace period to see if he can make it work. Because it's not like this team is losing championship games every year. It's not like sort of Ryan Day at Ohio State. They're doing everything right, but they just can't get over the line against Michigan. These guys can't get over the line against half the dog S in the NFL. So this idea that, if they were to get an offensive coordinator off, I don't know, one of Mike McDaniel's mates to be the head coach, they haven't won their first 3 games. They shouldn't have got rid of Pete. That's not it at all. And that's something that's really frustrating me, because there's this idea that the only pool of people you can hire are current NFL head coaches. That's one thing, because they say, well, who would you rather have? Well, you probably don't even know the guy you'd rather have. You've probably not heard of him, because there'll be some whiz kid somewhere that's going under the radar. And the second thing is the idea that if they don't win the Super Bowl in year 1, then why did you do it? Well, Pete Carroll's not going to win the Super Bowl again. So you've got a 2 or 3 year grace period before you even start to compare what may have happened with Pete Carroll. And that's the 2 things that I am finding quite frustrating with the argument. And there's just too much of a safety net that people have with Pete Carroll, that we know what we're going to get and it's all right. But I don't know about you guys. I'm not here for all right. I want to win. And if we have to lose to win, fine. But I'm not here for your 9-8 in the playoffs. As I said on the last show, the relevant side of irrelevant. That's not what I'm looking for when I support a team.
Quick reminder, Philadelphia Eagles 2020. They finished 4-11-1, and they fired Doug Peterson. They had their first season under Nick Sirianni and only finished 9-8. The year after, they were 14-3 and went to the Super Bowl and could easily have won the Super Bowl. And they are currently 10-1, playing the Niners in a meaningful game to try and get to 11-1. And even if they lose, they'll be 10-2. So if they fire Carroll and go 9-8 next year, but it's a means to get into where the Eagles are now, no problem with that whatsoever. But there's just this scaredy cat approach to it. And Robbie, that it's true, isn't it? It's just, I don't know whether it's because a lot of people don't know life without Carroll, or it's just people just like him too much. But I can't listen to him anymore, as I mentioned. The team doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. He won't do what is needed to do to actually improve himself in charge. He just keeps his guys in there. I think if he fires Shane Waldron, he's going to really struggle to find somebody else. Heck, we might even just end up with Greg Olsen being the offensive coordinator. I don't see where this is going. I know you agree, because the first thing you said today was that Carroll needs to go. So let me ask you this. Is there any chance that he would go? Jody Allen has said that she's no intention of selling anytime soon. She said that 18 months ago. Whether that's changed or not, I've no idea. Obviously, she can sell in May next year. That's the first time that she will be able to do it. Do you see any chance that if the Seahawks miss the playoffs, that they would move on? Or is it Carroll until Carroll decides he's had enough? Because that, to me, you might as well just call the team the Seattle Carrolls.
I don't see a scenario realistically where the Seahawks let him go. I just can't. They've not shown me that they have that ability to do that. I could be wrong. And maybe this offseason, Jody Allen tells him that it's time for him to step down and do something different. I just don't think that's going to be the case. And I think the only way that Pete is going to go is going to be on Pete's terms, and Pete will decide when it's time for him to go. And maybe he'll be so burnt out by the end of the season that sorry.
You have a visitor.
I do.
He looks as perplexed by the Seahawks as well.
He's very. Come here. Tell him what you think of Geno Smith. Okay.
That's the perfect review card, probably.
Anyways, he's turned into my big Hawks watcher with me. He's great.
But yeah, that is a positive to come.
It's super great. Anyway, sorry, he's distracted. That's enough, buddy. I just don't see a scenario where Pete's going to leave unless it's on his terms. To be honest, that's my personal opinion.
Just on that, Rob. Sorry to interject. There was a comment that I thought was very illuminating in the press conference. I think immediately after the game, when Pete was asked about DBs and how they're supposed to defend the pass, and he said, that's something we're going to be working on a lot in this offseason. I really have to look at that in this offseason. And the way in which he said it was just so, with such assurance that it didn't seem to suggest that he was going to be doing that sort of sitting in his house in Hawaii, not working for a team. It very much struck me as like, when I'm prepping for the next season with the Seattle Seahawks, I need to look at this as a thing. And just the speed at which he said it, I thought that spoke volumes, to be honest, and not necessarily the volume that we want it to go in.
Yeah, and you just don't know, though. If you lose, they've lost 3 in a row. If they lose 5 in a row, if they go from 5-2 to 6-8, that is my maths. So 1-6 in a 7-game stretch, and the only win was against what has ended up being one of the worst teams in the NFL, the Washington Commanders, who are absolutely awful. It's hard to sort of know how the franchise will react to that could change things a little bit, because we've never been there with Carroll, Adam. They've had bad results, but they've always kind of had a good result to move it along. If they lose 6 out of 7 and 5 in a row, then that becomes a bit more serious, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, at what point is it too much? Like, Bill Belichick is going to get the tin tack at the Patriots, you would have thought. He's won 6 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
And 3 of them are more recently than the last Seahawk one. 3 of them.
Yeah.
He's had a Hall of Fame career since the Seahawks won the last Super Bowl, having already had a Hall of Fame level career before the Seahawks won their first Super Bowl. And the Patriots fans aren't going to be worried about nostalgia or sentiment. It's just the best thing for the team because the guy's run its course. And that's just the way it is.
I just want to watch them. I'd love to sort of just see something a bit different. I'm prepared for it to go wrong. Like, just imagine next year if they got, and it doesn't have to be, a big name, as you said, Adam. Who could really say that Kevin O'Connell will be a good offensive head coach before he got the Vikings job, or Mike McDaniel for that matter? you couldn't necessarily look at these people and go, that's the guy. There was no, there wasn't, neither of them were like Kyle Shanahan types who'd been around the league, had led, Matt Ryan to an MVP in a Super Bowl performance. That you have to sort of take a chance sometimes. And that's the way that the league's going. And just the thought that we could actually go and take on a McVay and a Shanahan and ask a few questions offensively like they do of us would be exciting. And I wrote a list down the other day. Most of the top teams now are run by offensive coordinators who have become head coaches. It's just the way that the league's gone. There's a big question I want to ask you both that we said we were going to talk about. I want to get to it now, but I want to just get a couple of super chats have come in. It is what it is, says, with a lot of really good new talent on the team now, I'm confused at something that is easier said than done, I guess. Change after time may be healthy. I think it is change. The Arsene Wenger example has been used so often. Eventually, it's been 13 years. Pete's not going to coach forever. What's the point of wasting another couple of years when we could just get on with it now? And get him a nice watch, promise him a statue or something, and let's move on. And Adam says, I've loved Pete's time here, and we as fans should always appreciate the championship his tenure brought. But it's time for a younger, more dynamic coaching staff and a more modern approach to O&D. I agree. And look, you're going to have to do something differently. Like the Niners have beaten the Eagles 14-6, and they are too good. And we can't, Carroll hasn't got the ideas and the answers to beat Kyle Shanahan anymore. They've beaten us, what is it now, 4 times in a row? And it will be 5 next week. So, yeah. So one of the things we were going to talk about, we've kind of left it towards the end here. One of the thoughts that I've written about recently is, so my expectation, I'll tell you what I think is going to happen, and then I'll ask you your opinions on this. I think Carroll will stay. I think they will fire Shane Waldron. I think they will try and appoint a new offensive coordinator again. And then what I think they will do is they will draft a quarterback. And the question will be, are they going to draft high enough where they feel like they don't need to make any bold move up the board? Or will they actually trade a haul to move very high up into the first round to get a quarterback? Now, I think there's a really strong chance of that happening for 2 reasons. First of all, if you intend to roll with a very talented, highly drafted rookie quarterback on your roster, and you want to cut Geno Smith to save the money, you can't cut Geno Smith and then go into the draft with no serious quarterback on the roster, because you'll tip your hat to everybody else to what your draft plans are. So if you are intending on cutting Geno Smith as a post-June first cut to save $22.5 million, the only way you can make sure that you get a quarterback is to trade up. And we've seen teams in recent years trade very high into the first round as soon as the league year opens. And even before that, I think it happened a couple of weeks before the league year opened one year, a team traded right up into the top 2 picks, to top 3 picks to make sure, it may have been the Niners, to make sure that they could get a quarterback. I can imagine the Seahawks trading into the top 3 picks to make sure they get a quarterback in this next draft. So that's sort of the one reason I think it'll happen. The other reason I think it'll happen is I think that Pete and John, it will be a little bit of partly a survival mission and partly a way to generate excitement again about a flagging franchise. So the survival mission part of it will be, let's go and get an ultra talented quarterback. People will give us the benefit of the doubt. They'll let us sort of see how this goes. If he's really, really good, like CJ Stroud, then we may be able to win a lot of games like the Texans are doing, and that will help us move forward. And the other thing is that if they don't do something like this and they go into the offseason without a lot of money to spend and they're just sort of moving the chairs on the Titanic a little bit, then the franchise is going to be as flat as a pancake. There's going to be more and more people sort of saying what's going on here, what they're actually doing, and they won't be able to tilt the field. I think they're going to go out and get a field tilting quarterback. The only concern that I have with it is that I think they may well think this is our last roll of the dice. We're the people in charge. We might not be in charge in a couple of years. Therefore, F those picks. Here's 3 first-round picks. Here's our 3rd round pick. Here's every pick that we are going to throw at whoever to get up, because it is not going to be cheap. Whether they pick 10th or 20th in the draft, they are going to have to pay a fortune to move into the top 3. And I think that they will do it. And once you've done that, can you really fire somebody after that? Or do you have to give them like 2-3 years with that quarterback to see if they can turn it around? And is anybody really going to want to come into a team that's spaffed all its draft picks on a quarterback that you didn't want? So I think there's a serious chance the Seahawks are going to trade up and they are going to end up with one of these QBs. And in my opinion, that will either be one of Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. I don't think they will. I really like Spencer Rattler, but I don't think he's going to get himself into sort of the top 5 range by the time this comes around. But who knows? But I like him a lot. Quinn Ewers, I think, could end up being viewed very, very highly by the time the process is done, especially if he plays well in the playoffs. So that's what I think. Robbie, thoughts?
I mean, you laid out a pretty good scenario there that makes a lot of sense. I could see them doing something like that. I could also see them, I mean, like on the flip side, I could see them being so prideful and thinking that they're going to pay Geno this year as well, and not drafting a quarterback and maybe until later, and sticking with their guns, thinking that they're on the cusp. They'll blame the refs for the Cowboy game, and then they'll blame something else for why they didn't get there. And someone said it earlier, and I really liked it. They're like, Pete's always turning the corner. He's always in on something, looking, and always compete. He's right there. He's got something. He's always doing something. And I think you're probably right. Waldron's gone after this year, and that he's going to bring someone else in, and then that'll be it. I think that's probably what the realistic scenario is going to happen. I could see a scenario where they do trade, but like it just doesn't seem like that's in their cards to go up for a quarterback like that when then they seem pretty sold on Geno. I could be wrong, but that's what it seems like.
I don't know if I agree there, Robbie, because I mean this has been a very aggressive team. They've made very aggressive trades.
I'm not saying they haven't been aggressive. I'm saying they seem pretty sold on Geno. I'm not saying they wouldn't be aggressive to go for a quarterback, because obviously they've made aggressive trades. Obviously Adams and other ones are just crazy. But I'm saying I just think I don't know if they're going to necessarily make an aggressive move to go after a rookie quarterback who may or may not succeed just because it's Pete's final year. I think Pete will probably rather go in with a veteran quarterback like Geno Smith, who he thinks he trusts, who he so believes in himself that he will believe that he can turn it around.
I would have agreed with you if we were talking 12 months ago. But Geno Smith has just not played well enough this year. I mean, it's unthinkable to go into next season with them just going, and now we present to you the 3rd year of Geno Smith. It just, to me, and look, even if they don't have to necessarily trade up, they have to draft a quarterback, and then they have to sort of make that turn. And I think the reason why they would trade up perhaps more so than staying put is that they could get somebody who they think. And there's all sorts of things that have happened. Like the fact that CJ Stroud has played so well might make them believe that, well, here was our grade on CJ Stroud, for example. Let's say they had him ranked this highly. And, oh, look, here's 3 quarterbacks that we rate higher than him now. And we'll go up and get them and believe that we can do what the Texans are doing with CJ Stroud and get the excitement going again. I think that's sort of the thought process with it. And I do not think, and the other thing, Robbie, on Geno is that Geno on 7 million last year or Geno on 10 million this year is a different beast to Geno on $31 million next year or 33 if he gets to 9 wins. That becomes a harder thing. And I think if they go into next year with Geno Smith as normal, they may well believe in Geno. You may well be right on that, Robbie, and you make a very sound argument with that they like Geno, they're going to go with Geno, they're going to persevere with him. But if they do that and they end up with another season like this, I don't think they'll be in a job in 12 months' time. When they're actually getting towards 1 year left on Pete's contract. And I think it's actually, if they end up having a really bad end to this season as it's going that way, I don't think they can turn around and to the ownership and the fan base and go, we're just going to run it back. I just don't think they will. But look, take your point on board. Adam, what's your take on this?
I am absolutely fine with them trading the house to move up, but only if it's to move up to number 1 to take the guy that you absolutely want. I never subscribe to this idea that, well, there's two great guys that we love and we'll happily have one or the two. I have no problem whatsoever with you mortgaging the entire future of the franchise, but don't give me the BS that you're happy with one out of two guys. Even if that's what you think, I think if you're going to put the whole future into one person, there has to be one person that you want and target and go and get. And even if it ends up being wrong, fine. Like, I know that Carroll.
Adam, sorry to interrupt, Adam. Something's happening with your mic, and it sounds like it's clipping something.
Oh, sorry. Maybe, is that any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Fine. Sorry, I don't know how much of that came through or otherwise. If you heard, did you hear what I was saying?
We could hear what you were saying. It was just
Fine.
it was like a constant brushing of your mic.
And I know that the second pick has proven better than the first this year, but that it's a process thing that I would have real issues with, that moving up and giving everything for, well, if Caleb goes, then we'll take Drake May, we'll be fine with him. I don't believe in that. Even if you want Drake May, go and get a number one. If that's what you want to do, fine. But if you're going to show that much conviction, then go and do it, and do it properly. Otherwise, stay pat, and then maybe make a trade on draft day to go from 17 to 11, maybe where they end up or whatever. But if you're going to do it properly, get to number one and take the guy that you absolutely want and can plan for months in advance before the draft day happens.
Interesting. I actually think that it'll be really hard to trade up to number one, just because of the teams that are up there. So I don't think there's any chance that Chicago Bears will stay with Justin Fields. The GM didn't draft him. He has too many turnovers. Is he a great athlete? Yes. Is he very explosive? Yes. I cannot see Chicago ended up with this number one overall pick and going. And the other thing is they get to reset the rookie contract thing. So they could take Caleb Williams and have him on year one rookie contract, trade Justin Fields for whatever they could get for him. And I wouldn't want the Seahawks to trade for Justin Fields either, before anybody says that. It's just a turnover machine. He's just never been able to do it. It's just all over the place, really. Too much boom and bust. But I think they would take a quarterback, and then they would trade Fields. And then the other big problem you've got is it's the Patriots at the minute who are second overall, and their quarterback situation is so desperate that I don't think they would trade out of that spot. So it actually becomes increasingly hard. So what I think will happen is if the season ended today, you would have Panthers, therefore Chicago Bears number one, New England, and then Arizona. And I think you would see quarterback Marvin Harrison Jr. coming off the board. And then the first opportunity you would have to trade up would be Washington at number 4 or Chicago at number 5. So that's if it stayed this way. Obviously, there's still a lot of football to be played. And that's why I'm sort of bringing Jaden Daniels, Quinn Ewers, and those two into the equation here, because Jaden Daniels' stock is going that way, that he could go very, very early. Do you like him enough to trade up? Maybe they do. I think they will like Quinn Ewers enough to trade up. It's whether or not Quinn Ewers wants to declare. But the fact that Texas have got to the championship playoffs, if they win the national championship, Ewers might want to just think, there's nothing left for me here. I'll turn pro. And if he leads Texas to the national championship, his stock will be top 5 anyway. So that's the kind of the thought process with it. And I wouldn't be uncomfortable. But I get your point, Adam, because if you can't trade up to number 4 in March, because there's always a chance that someone will just usurp you. And then what you're going to do? You'd have to have the reason that the Niners traded up to number 3 is because they had 3 quarterbacks. They would happily take any of them. If you trade up to number 4, you have to have 4 quarterbacks that you're prepared to take. Or maybe you trade up to number 3 or 4, and then you see if you can move up even further. I don't know. But either way, it's going to cost you an absolute load.
But also, one of the 3 that everyone thought they were comfortable taking, they weren't comfortable taking, and then maybe they ended up, blowing it all on Trey Lance. And it's incredible what they've done to mitigate that and build a team without him. But as you say, stuff can happen in the draft, and and in the process building up to the draft that you don't like someone that you thought you did when you get a closer look at them. And I don't want the Seahawks to, mortgage the entire future on being in that position. I think that would be tantamount to, functional suicide, to be honest.
Robbie, we know what you think about whether this is likely to happen. I'm interested to know whether you'd be entertain the thought, because I think the reason why the plan might work, at least from a personnel sort of justifying the move, not so much that it will work, because obviously people might go, well, I don't trust Pete Carroll or whatever to do this. But in terms of why it might work, the roster might not be an elite roster, but it's also not full of holes. And if you do move on from Geno Smith, Quandre Diggs, and Jamal Adams, and maybe even Draymond Jones, and you can also cut Brian Monet, and you could rework Will Disley's contract, you could free up the money so that you could replace some of those positions on the cheap, and then sort of keep Leonard Williams, maybe bring in an experienced defensive lineman to man the interior. You could actually come up with a roster that's not got that many holes. That you're not sort of no glaring. You could create a roster that does not have glaring weaknesses, and you'd still have sort of 2-3 years of club control with a lot of your players in terms of rookie contracts and stuff like that. So you're not, you could actually say you don't really need. Well, it's not that you don't need. You can maybe justify trading away your 2025, your 2026 first round picks to go and get the Holy Grail at quarterback, if you believe one of these quarterbacks is the Holy Grail. If it happened, if you heard on March the 5th or whatever, Seahawks have traded up to the second overall pick. They've traded away their next 2 firsts and their first this year, and maybe the next 2 seconds. It's a Robert the Griffin III, Trey Lance type arrangement here to move up and get a quarterback. What would your reaction be?
I mean, I'd be pretty excited, to be honest. I mean, I think, that gives you some sense of hope for the future, and that they're moving in a different direction at the quarterback position that I think most people want to see. So I'd be pretty excited about it. Now, would I maybe scoff at some of the draft capital that we gave up, depending on what it was? Maybe. Would I be super frustrated if it was a guy that was a Trey Lance that they traded for in 3 years' time, and it was just a terrible trade? Because we don't have the coaching staff that 49ers have to combat that. If we make a terrible trade and we get some player that just isn't good enough at quarterback, we don't have a McVay to help us turn the ship around, as Adam rightly pointed, really well, to be able to say, well, we still didn't need those 3 first-round picks, and we were still able to turn this team into a championship caliber team. We don't have that coaching staff. So for me, would I be excited? Yeah, but there would also be a little bit of hesitation as well.
Yeah, the thing is that the thing that I like about the idea is if you get the talented enough quarterback, say it was Caleb Williams, so they were able to find a way to get Caleb Williams. The first year that Trevor Lawrence was in the NFL, he had Urban Meyer as his as his head coach, and that went abysmally, and they fired him after a year. But it was still a really appealing job, to come in and work with Trevor Lawrence. And then Doug Peterson, who's won a Super Bowl, goes in there, and now look at the Jaguars in a much better place. So even if Pete gets it wrong in year 1 with that quarterback, you could still have a lot of people going, I want to work there. This actually sounds like a really good situation. So I'm not against it. I'm ready for it. I mean, it'd be an absolute disaster for the blog if they didn't have a first round or second round pick for the next 3 years. But I'm more interested in seeing the Seahawks playing really well. And if this is the only way to do it, it's to have a quarterback. And look, I thought Geno Smith played well, very well, for 3 quarters against Dallas. But the difference between being able to do that for 3 quarters and Dak Prescott, who did it for 4 quarters and actually was, really clutch plays at the end, getting away from Darrell Taylor, completing the pass, throwing the touchdown pass at the end. Dak got the job done. Geno didn't. And it's not Geno's fault that the Seahawks lost the other day. But can you get somebody who, when the game is on the line, can do what Dak Prescott did? Convert a 4th down, convert a 3rd down, or whatever, produce a bit of magic to win you a football game. Got a couple of super chats here. Adam says, Rob, I totally agree that the Hawks should go after Rattler. Thank you, Robbie and Adam, for the consistent approach and love for the Hawks. Spencer Rattler's just so naturally gifted. I don't think there's any real difference between him and sort of the top sort of generational type QBs as a thrower. Like maybe there've been other things that have held him back over the years. But you just go and watch him throw. There's high school tape online. Just go and watch him throw. He's unbelievable. Speaking of unbelievable, the Niners are really good, aren't they? Like I've just seen that they're beating the Eagles 14-6. And they had that 3-game losing streak. And they've just come roaring back and now look like the best team in football by an absolute mile again. It is what it is. Says, hey, Rob, I feel bad that you travelled all the way to Seattle for that Thanksgiving game. I hope you enjoyed your time in the city while visiting. Had an amazing time. Big thank you to Robbie for the ticket for the Niners game. Big thank you to Curtis Allen for the ticket to the Kraken game. And a big thank you to the Washington Huskies for the great time I was able to spend with them as well while I was out there. Absolutely loved every second of that. Trip was brilliant. Seahawks was the only negative, frankly. They were appalling. Is there anything else, guys, that you either want to bring up with regard to the prospect of trading up in that topic, or anything else relating to the Seahawks that you would care to discuss at this point? Because if there is, let's get into it before we finish.
Yeah, I'll just say like real fast, just like, with the idea of trading up, like if to be, and again, I'm no draft expert or anybody by any means, but I remember about this time last year, I was saying absolutely not to CJ Stroud. He comes from Ohio State, no good quarterback comes from Ohio State. Yeah, he throws a pretty ball, but no. And then as the draft process went on, I was like, okay, I'm getting on board with this guy. I really like him. And by draft time, I was really on board with Stroud. So I would be interested to see how this whole draft process plays out. Like I'm keeping a little more optimistic this time around going into the draft. Seeing how, especially the last year going to the combine and seeing the quarterbacks throw, that was pretty fun. So more interested this year and more invested, I think, in the quarterbacks than I was last year, just for the simple fact of how wrong I was about Stroud going into it. And so, college ball is a different beast, but I'm interested to see kind of what comes of it, during this draft process.
I'd love to know if they regret not, just trading up for CJ Stroud now. I don't think it was ever on their agenda, frankly. Maybe they would have considered him if he lasted to 5, but I don't think they ever seriously considered moving up. And I think they wanted to use all of their picks. But CJ Stroud has just been fantastic. And he was QB1 on the SDB draft board. Is there anything, Adam, that you want to finish with? Any final thoughts?
With a little bit of mirth, I know that I don't think that the players on the team are particularly thrilled about how the schedule has been, produced in the last few weeks. There's not really much of a routine: Sunday, Thursday, Sunday. And to top it off, as I think I said on the show, I booked flights to go to the Eagles game next Sunday. No problem. Why would that be a problem? I'm flying back Monday night. Great. But I think when it comes to my sports luck, the Seahawks-Eagles game being the first game in NFL history to be flexed into a Monday and causing me a situation where I've had to change my flights at the last minute, which really messes up work. And I know, cry me the biggest river, everyone. But sometimes you just feel like you got no luck in this sporting life. And that really did feel like one, when the first game in NFL history to be flexed into Monday Night Football to kind of mess up my trip, caused me all sorts of negotiations to do at home and negotiations, reparations, and all the above to make it work. So yeah, that was me, and that's my little thing at the moment. But it does feel a bit weird that this is the second Sunday in a row there's no Seahawk game. The season has felt quite stagnated with that, sort of without any real routine, doesn't it?
I hated them moving that game. One, because I knew you were going to it, and it was. I messaged straight away in our little chat, say, what does this mean then? Are you going to be able to go? And you were like, no. So it's good to know that you have been able to sort that out, and that you will be able to go to the game. But I can't deal with another chuffing prime time, late night, staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning to watch this version of the Seahawks. Like, it was always really exciting, a prime time late game when they were good. Now it's just like, oh God, I'm just going to be tired all day tomorrow. So I was really frustrated that game. The other thing is now that the Niners have gone 21-6 up against the Eagles, I really hope that the narrative this week, there are too many things. We've talked about a lot of the things that need to be talked about. I hope the narrative tomorrow within sort of the Seattle Seahawks media sphere is not, oh, look, the Eagles just lost in the same way that the Seahawks did to the Niners. Therefore, the Niners must just be really good, and therefore we give the Seahawks a pass when they lost on Thanksgiving and inevitably lose this week. I hope that's not the case. Now, the Eagles have played winning football, but have been quite sloppy for a number of weeks. Niners ultra motivated from what happened in the NFC Championship game. I felt for a while that the Eagles were going to drop a game at some point, and I even think it might have come in Seattle. It looks as if it's going to happen today. I hope that doesn't distract from how bad the Seahawks were on Thanksgiving. And just because the Eagles are getting a towel in from the Niners as well, shouldn't change that. Guys, really appreciate 80 minutes of your time. We haven't been able to get together for obviously a couple of games, so appreciate spending the time with you today. I hope that the Seahawks fans have enjoyed it. Hope we've discussed the topics that you want us to get into as well. If you can subscribe to the channel, it'd be a real help. If you could like the video, it'd be a real help as well. If you could leave a comment in the comment section, it would be a real help. All of those things massively help the channel. And don't forget SeahawksDraftBlog.com. There's a huge horizontal board on there now. I have graded 164 draft players, put them in a horizontal board. I think horizontal boards are more useful than top 50 lists, which don't really mean anything. And mock drafts at this point. I think horizontal board, much more useful to sort of check out. There's a 4,500 word accompanying article to go with it, which is ridiculous. I wrote a 10,000 word dissertation when I was at university, and that's half. And quite frankly, I could have done a 10,000 word article, but I appreciate everybody's feedback as well that they prefer the long form articles, but I'm a bit worried that people get bored because people ask me questions about things I've written about at the end, and it just shows me they haven't got to the end of the article. So your continued feedback on that will be much appreciated. But it is there if you want it, even if you have to read it in 3 sittings. It's there if you want it, and lots of articles coming over the next few days. Robbie, Adam, thank you for your company. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you to everybody for watching live. Until next time, bye for now. See you later.